I'm 29 and usually I don't mind working nights. They're quiet and there's less chaos to deal with, but that night wasn't supposed to be mine. Around 9, the charge nurse rang me, practically begging me to come in and cover since someone had called out. I almost said no, but I could use the extra hours. I got dressed, grabbed my bag, and drove over. The streets were empty, the kind of emptiness where you notice every stoplight because no other cars are around. When I pulled into the lot, the building looked like it had been shut down for the night. Only a few windows glowed faintly, and the automatic doors made a hollow echo when they slid open. Inside, it was cooler, sterile, that faint smell of disinfectant lingering in the air. I signed in at the desk, clipped on my badge, and started down the hallway. Most of the staff were tucked into their stations, heads down over paperwork, sipping coffee, trying to make it through their own shifts. The farther I walked, the quieter it got. The sound of my shoes against the floor echoed until I reached the end of the corridor where the room was waiting. I opened the door and the first thing I noticed was how cold it felt compared to the hall. The light above flickered faintly and buzzed, casting everything in a pale, sickly glow. The room was bare. No window, no decoration, just a bed and a chair. He was already there, sitting upright on the mattress. His hands rested flat on his knees and his eyes were fixed on the blank wall ahead. He didn't move when I entered, didn't look at me, didn't say a word. I dragged a chair into the far corner, the scrape against the floor sounding way too loud in the silence. He didn't react. I sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and tried to look at my clipboard like it mattered. Every now and then I glanced up, same posture, same stare, not a blink. For the first hour, nothing happened. I checked my watch too often, scribbled a few meaningless notes just to keep busy. I even took out my water bottle and sipped slowly, just to fill the silence with some kind of action. But every time I looked at him, he was in the exact same position, upright, still, silent. It was the stillness that started to bother me. People shift. They scratch their face, stretch their arms, cross and uncross their legs. But not him, not once. It was like he'd been carved into that position. At some point, I pulled out my phone. I figured I'd scroll through something, maybe text a friend to keep me awake. The screen lit up with a red battery symbol, 5%. I cursed it under my breath and stuffed it back in my pocket. I'd need it in case something actually happened. A few minutes later, the screen went black, dead. I tried the door handle then, maybe out of habit. It didn't turn. I frowned, jiggled it again. Nothing. I gave it a harder push, rattling it against the frame. Still locked. My chest tightened a little. I told myself it was fine, that the lock was supposed to work that way. But the truth was, I didn't like knowing I couldn't leave if I wanted to. The air in the room felt heavier as the minutes crawled by. The hum of the light seemed louder. I shifted in my chair, stretched my legs, crossed and uncrossed my arms. Anything to break the tension. He didn't move, not even to blink. And then suddenly he did. His head tilted slightly, just enough that I could tell it was deliberate. His eyes were no longer on the wall. They were angled just a fraction toward me, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. I tried to stay calm, but my pulse picked up. I tapped my pen against the clipboard, slow and steady, pretending to focus on my notes, but my eyes kept flicking back to him, the tilt of his head, the way his chest rose and fell in slow, deliberate breaths. Then, without warning, he stood up. The springs in the bed creaked. My heart jumped into my throat. He didn't look at me. He started packing across the small space, his bare feet soundless against the tile. At first it was slow, controlled. Step, step, turn, step, step, turn. Then it quickened, sharper, his shoulders hunching slightly as he moved. That was when I realized he wasn't silent anymore. His lips were moving, and I could hear the faintest whisper. I leaned forward in my chair, straining to catch the words, but they blurred together, too soft to make sense of. Just a rhythm, steady, repeating. I stayed frozen in my corner, my eyes tracking his every movement. Minutes dragged like hours. The whispers grew a little louder, more insistent, though I still couldn't make out what he was saying, and then he stopped. He froze mid-step, turned his head, and locked his eyes directly on me. My chest went tight. I couldn't move. He sat down on the edge of the bed, still holding my gaze. His lips kept moving, and for the first time that night I heard the words clearly. I see you. It was quiet, calm, almost gentle, but the way he said it made my stomach twist. He repeated it, I see you, again, I see you. Every repetition was heavier, sharper. His eyes didn't waver, didn't blink. My hands started to shake. My throat was so dry I could barely swallow. I stood up too quickly, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. I stumbled to the door, grabbed the handle, and pounded with both fists. "Hey, somebody, open the door," my voice cracked. My palms slammed the metal again and again. Behind me, the whispering stopped. I turned my head slowly, my whole body trembling. He was standing just a few feet away. I didn't hear him move. 1 second he was on the bed, and the next he was right there, inches from me. His eyes were wide, fixed on mine, unblinking. He didn't touch me, didn't lunge, just stared, silent now. My legs shook so badly I thought I'd collapse. My vision blurred at the edges. And then I heard it, the metallic click of the lock turning. The door swung open, and a security guard stepped in. The air rushed out of me. My knees buckled. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the patient calmly sitting back down on his bed, like nothing had happened. When I came to, I was in the hallway, the guard crouched beside me, asking if I was okay. I nodded weakly, but my voice wouldn't come out. I never found out who that man was, never asked, and I don't want to. But sometimes, late at night, when it's quiet, I swear I still hear it. His voice, low and deliberate, "I see you." And when I do, I can't help but feel like maybe, somehow, he still does. I work as a nurse in the ICU of a mid-sized hospital. I'm in my late 20s, still early in my career, but I've settled into the routine here. Nights are the hardest, long stretches under buzzing fluorescent lights, surrounded by machines that never sleep. The sounds of ventilators, infusion pumps, and heart monitors have become as familiar to me as my own breathing. I like to think I'm steady under pressure. My coworkers tease me for being the one who always double-checks everything, but I've never minded. In this place, caution is what keeps people alive. That night started out like any other. The unit was quiet, just the low hum of machines and the occasional shuffle of footsteps from the nurses making rounds. I was charting notes when the automatic doors slid open and a man in scrubs stepped inside. He looked the part, standard light blue scrubs, a stethoscope around his neck, even a badge clipped neatly to his pocket. He carried himself with the kind of calm assurance I usually saw in seasoned doctors, the ones who have done this work for decades and don't get rattled by anything. "Evening," he said in a voice that was both relaxed and commanding. "I'm covering for one of your attendings. I've been asked to review a patient." I nodded and introduced myself. He didn't linger on small talk. He went straight into the details of a case, mentioning medications and treatments in a way that, on the surface, sounded correct. I followed along, jotting down a few of his suggestions. Nothing about him seemed immediately out of place. But then little things caught my attention. When I asked about dosage adjustments, he waved his hand dismissively. "Just increase it a bit," he said casually. Most doctors I knew would have given an exact number, not something vague. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe he was in a hurry. Maybe he was used to giving instructions quickly, expecting the staff to fill in the blanks. But still, his choice of words stuck with me. He moved around the unit with confidence, checking charts, glancing at monitors, nodding as if he already knew the patients. He even stopped by one bed, introduced himself to the patient, and spoke with practiced ease. If I hadn't been paying attention, I would have accepted him without question. Then he asked me to open the medication cart. "Let's get this sorted now," he said. His tone was light, but his eyes lingered on the locked drawers a little too long. Something inside me hesitated. Out of habit, I pulled up the digital roster to confirm his name. I typed it in quickly, half expecting it to appear. It didn't. I tried again with a different spelling. Still nothing. I glanced back at him. He was packing, hands clasped behind his back as though he was waiting for me to finish. When I asked him to spell his name, his response was slower this time, almost hesitant. Then he smiled faintly and said, "You know what, don't worry about it. I'll take care of this myself." That was the moment the unease hardened into fear. He turned toward one of the patient beds, and I instinctively stepped in front of him. My voice came out firmer than I expected. "I need to confirm this with the attending first." For the first time, his expression changed. His polite mask slipped just enough for me to see the irritation underneath. His jaw clenched and his eyes narrowed. Then, without warning, he lunged at me. The motion was fast, violent. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. Alarms from the patient monitors started to beep, and another nurse shouted my name. He lunged again, his hand grazing my sleeve. I shoved an IV pole between us, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. And then he laughed, a sharp, unsettling laugh. "Relax," he said mockingly. "I'm just having fun." The words hit me like ice. This wasn't a doctor at all. This was someone playing a role, and in that instant I recognized him. He wasn't staff, he was a patient from another wing. A psychiatric admission. He had gotten hold of scrubs, a badge, a stethoscope, and slipped into ICU to play his twisted game. I pressed the silent call button under the counter, never taking my eyes off him. He lunged once more, grabbing at my arm, but the doors burst open before he could do more. Security rushed in, tackling him to the ground. His stethoscope snapped off, his fake badge clattered across the floor. Even pinned down, he struggled, twisting to look back at me with a grin that made my stomach turn. Over and over, he repeated the same phrase as they dragged him out. "Just having fun, just having fun." The ICU slowly settled again, but the air felt heavy, charged. I kept thinking about how close I had come to believing him, how easily I could have followed his instructions without question. When my shift finally ended, I sat in my car in the parking lot, the silence pressing in around me. My hands were still trembling, and the only thought running through my head was, why did it have to happen on my shift? I'm Alex, 24, just out of nursing school, and I've always been the kind of person who notices details others overlook. I like order, I like routines, and I like to feel in control. Nights on the hospital floor are supposed to be predictable, quiet, repetitive, but tonight, everything went wrong. I was finishing my rounds in one of the supply rooms at hospital, checking medications for my patients, when the keycard system malfunctioned. The door I had used to enter refused to open, the light flashing red. My stomach sank. I was already inside, and now I was trapped. I tried the handle again, swiped my card over and over, but nothing worked. I jabbed at the emergency alarm. Dead. I tried calling security on my hospital-issued phone. No signal. The line was dead. Panic rose, but I couldn't let it take over. Some of the patients I'd been trying to help depended on the meds in this room. I couldn't just sit here and wait. That's when I noticed the ceiling hatch, tucked in the corner, dusty and almost hidden. My first thought was to hesitate, but then I remembered why I got into nursing in the first place, to help people no matter what. I pushed the hatch open and hoisted myself into the crawl space above. Dust and insulation rained down on me as I moved through the narrow, cramped space, scraping my hands against pipes and rusted wiring. The air was stale and heavy, every creak of the ceiling echoing like a warning. My heart pounded, but I kept going, telling myself this was the only way out. At the end of the crawl, I stumbled onto a heavy wooden door. I pushed it open and stepped into a room that seemed frozen in time. Shelves were stacked with old patient records, yellowed and brittle, and black and white photos lined the walls. In the images, people were performing strange rituals, faces solemn, hands raised in ways that made my skin crawl. Dust coated everything, but some papers and objects looked recently moved, like the room was still used occasionally. The air felt thick with secrets, as if the room itself was watching. I took a careful step forward, trying to make sense of it all. Then I heard it, a faint rustling from the corner. My pulse spiked. I couldn't tell if it was the wind, a rat, or something else entirely. My instincts screamed at me that I wasn't alone. I felt along the walls, trying to find another exit. My phone's flashlight bounced over piles of old records and strange objects. Eventually, I found a narrow tunnel leading away from the room. The passage was tight, damp, and twisted in the darkness. I moved cautiously, every step echoing in the silence. After what felt like forever, I spotted a hatch at the end. I pushed it open and emerged into the night courtyard. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet grass. The sky was clear and the stars shone brightly, almost painfully so. For a moment the world felt calm again, ordinary, and the danger behind me seemed unreal. I quit that job shortly afterward. I found another position, something safer, something normal. But sometimes I still think about that room. The photos, the rituals, the rustling sound I never understood. Should I have told someone? Should I go back and check what's really happening there? The thought keeps coming back, gnawing at me in quiet moments, and I don't know if I'll ever stop wondering.